This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Class is Leilu Nishmat Ratzal Bat Miriam. Before we actually begin, being that we spoke about scientific situations and people and evidence in the past few classes, I got some interesting responses. One of the responses was that I am trying to ridicule science, I'm bringing science down, it's disrespectful for the scientific community. So let's just clarify it. I, chas v'shalom, do not intend or want or need to bring any scientific person, evidence, or community down. That is not the intent of these classes. Rather, I have tremendous respect for them, as they make my life a lot easier. They make the ability, first of all, to transfer Torah throughout the entire world. They make so much stuff in our world so much more significantly easier, better, and more enjoyable. So, chas v'shalom, that I should say anything against them, anything bad. I respect them and I thank them for all their hard work and service. The reason why we went through these types of scenarios that may seem as we're downplaying certain scientific evidences, and it's really not the scientific evidences but rather more the theories, was in essence because the society that we live in today holds the scientific world as like Kodesh Kodashim. This is like the holiest of the holiest. If science says this, like forget it. Science doesn't even have to say it. It could even be like the Mishpacha magazine writes about it. It could be somebody who once read a psychology book, is all of a sudden a psychologist, and they read, it might be a good idea to speak to your kids every other night, so then they'll want to speak more to you, whatever, like something like that. It's scientific, now everyone's going to start doing it. So we hold scientific in a very high pedestal. The problem with that is that it's the one thing that's unchanging is the Torah. The one thing that's constantly changing is science. So if you're trying to compare the two, you rather focus on the Torah, which is unchanging, and then compare it against the science, not vice versa. So that was the essence of why I was going on. If it sounded like I was bashing, I apologize. I don't know if anybody got offended with the so close scientific community, and they're listening to my classes. That's really unbelievable. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry that I offended you, but I'm honored that they're actually listening to these classes. Okay, so now let's begin with today's class. Today's topic is well, let's even back it up a little bit. What is this? This is the fifth class, I think, in this series. So beforehand, we sort of tried to prove that there's a God. And we gave some, different types of evidence, proof, theories of why there is very likely that there is a God. Now we have to tackle another issue. And that other issue is, who said God still cares about the world? Let's say he just created the world, he did a good job. It's sort of the watchmaker theory. The watchmaker made the watch, and then he went bye-bye. He didn't stay with the watch and whisper to it, tick, 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 every few seconds, because it just does it by itself. So maybe this is what God did. He created the world, created a magnificent world, a beautiful world, such a perfect world that he doesn't even have to be involved in it. Everything goes as nature, and God doesn't care, no one wants to. Some people say he cannot change anything. So we should leave it as that's the world, and God takes his, went on to his next project. He was bored for 6 days. He did something for 6 days, rested on the seventh one, then moved on to his next project. This idea is known as Deism, which is thanks to you why we're bringing this in there. So the problem that we have with this is if God is not in control of the universe and the universe just runs by itself, that means that there's no purpose. Like, what is the purpose? So we were sort of an experiment. Now, we're like bored, and then, it's like whatever. It's like, it's still just going on until it just dies out, until the juice runs out, until the battery runs out, and then we finish. It just defeats the entire purpose of creation. So we're going to look at it, and we consider it as a completely different scenario. We say that the Judaism states that not only God created the world, but he actually continues to run it. He continues to play a very, very important and much needed role in the whole creation as we know it today. So one thing that we're going to try to prove is, how do we know that God still plays control in this universe, in this world? And we're going to do that through Jewish history. We're going to also we're going to hit two birds with one stone over here. We're going to also be able to prove, and we're sort of jumping the gun a little bit, because as we're moving forward, we want to know and be able to prove, is the Torah divine? Because if we could say that we prove that there's a God, who said that the Torah is divine? So we're sort of going to tackle both of these today, but we're going to actually go in more in depth in the coming classes, Be'ezrat Hashem. So, imagine some person walks up to you in the street, and he's, scratching himself very hard, and he's like, hey, you got some crack? You got, what? And you're like, what? And be like, well, I didn't say anything. What do you want? So he goes to you and he's like, you got $5? $5? You have $5? You have $6? You have $7? You have $5? You have $5? And, then you see him like glancing from black. He's like, listen. You listening? Listen. Come closer. I'll tell you something. No one knows. You have $5? And he's he's scratching himself. He's constantly doing this. He's checking his gums to make sure that everything's okay. He's looking back and forth. And all of a sudden, he's like, oh, you know what? They bargain. They bargain with themselves. These people, you don't have to talk anything. They're going to bargain. They say, no, $5, $4. You got $4, $3, $1. Just give me $1. I'll tell you something that's going to change your life. I'm telling you. You listening to me? Focus. I'll tell you. Just give me the money. I'll tell you something that changed. You're not a cop, are you? Okay. Just make sure you're not a cop. All right. You give him the $1 just to get him to go away. And then he's like. And then he looks back and forth. It's like, listen, I haven't eaten since I was 6 years old. I was living on water and like carrots. Oh, can you give me another $1? And you're like, okay, fine. You know what? Here's another $1. It is. And he's like, and then he looks around again, back and forth, and he's like, you sure you're not a cop, right? It's like, yeah, I'm positive I'm not a cop. Here's $1, just please. And he's like, no, I'm going to tell you. I'm a man of my word. I'm going to tell you. I said, I'm going to tell you. He says, you listening? And then he goes and he says, you see these 4 trees over here? And you're like, yeah. And he's like, these are not trees. He's like, these are like magical people that have really long ears, and they're listening to everything that we're saying. And in 3 minutes from now, they're going to transform themselves out of the trees, and they're going to tap this car, and they're going to jump into outer space. And then he skips off, singing, Follow the Yellow Brick Road. And that was the end of that story. Now, you're sitting over there, and you start laughing. And you're like, and then, as you're starting to laugh, you're like, why am I laughing? I'm a terrible person. This person obviously needs, has some issues. Why am I laughing at him? And then you're thinking, well, I gave him $2, so am I that bad of a person? And while you're contemplating how bad of a person you are, maybe you're a good person, all of a sudden these 4 trees transform themselves into these magical creatures with long ears, and they walk around, they touch the car, and they jump into outer space. Now you're sitting over there, and assuming you didn't, touch any of his medicinal, extracurricular activities that he was dealing with, you're completely sober and everything's okay. What are you going to think at that moment? You're going to look for that guy and says, tell me some stocks, or this guy knows something that other people, didn't know. So the idea with prophecy of telling the future is really dependent on how extreme and specific that the future is. If I were to come to you today and I would say, listen, in about 5 years' time, there's going to be a war in the Middle East. Within 5 years, there's going to be a war in the Middle East. It's going to get ugly. Am I a prophet if it happens? No, because it's very likely that this is what's going to happen, unfortunately. If I were to tell you that in 15 years' time, they're going to create drones, and they're going to commercialize these drones, that they're going to be able to transport people. It's going to be Uber is going to invest millions of billions of dollars into this, and that's it. It's going to be unmanned, vehicles that are going to fly you to destination, and they can make it speak to you, so you can give it ratings on the, how good was the conversation, everything. They'll have people speaking from India, hello, thank you for flying with a drone. How can I talk to you? They'll do the whole situation, replay the whole thing. And if it happens, does that mean that I am a prophet? Not necessarily. But if I were to tell you something that is very specific or very impossible, and it does happen, then you're starting to think, okay, maybe this is onto something. It was prophesied in the Torah. In Malachi, chapter 3, verse 6, it says that, for I, the Lord, have not changed, and you, the sons of Yaakov, Jacob, will never be wiped out. It's prophesied already in the Torah that the Jewish nation will never ever be wiped out. They will always exist forever and ever. And we have this again in Genesis chapter 17, verse 17. This is going to be, I'm going to make you a brit l'dorot olam, forever. I'm going to give you a covenant forever, which means we're not going anywhere. We're staying, till the end of time. It's going to be us and the cockroaches, whatever it is. We're going to the end. The idea behind this is nice and dandy, and I wanted you to think about it as if I'm trying to sell you a religion. I'm trying to sell you this religion. I'll be like, this is going to be awesome. We're going to be around forever. Don't worry about it. We're going to stay on to the end of time. Then, that would make sense if, let's say, you deal with something like, for example, Japan. Japan is in Japan, and it's always been in Japan. So it could be there for many, many, many years, and there's no issue with that. The problem is that the Torah itself tells that the Jewish people will be exiled, will be scattered throughout the entire world. You look at Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 4, verse 27, and God will scatter you among the people. And this is repeated again in Vayikra, Leviticus, chapter 26, verse 33, and again repeated in Devarim, chapter 28, verse 64. Again and again that I'm going to scatter you around all the nations of the world. Yet, still saying that, you're telling me I'm going to scatter you throughout the entire nations of the world, and yet you're still going to be here forever. That's something that's a little bit conflicting, because once you're telling me that you're scattering me around the world, it's going to reduce my chance of survival. We know that there's idea of survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest means that you will survive if you are the strongest. Now, if you take people and you sprinkle them all over the world, the chances that they're going to survive is going to be very slim. They might survive, but they'll assimilate. They'll become one of whatever nation they are a part of. So, when we're going to look at this, we see that not only we still existing, but the Torah prophesied already that where we would be, and that we would be far away, and yet still, beyond any reasonable doubt, we are still existing. And you look at the Jewish survival. You look even back to Egypt, to Mitzrayim. The historians are at loss. They don't know how to explain how the Jews got out of Egypt. And the archaeologists go and they say, it's natural disasters and all these things. Everything was just, happened to work out just so perfectly for the Jewish people. They were in the right place at the right time. Even though there was an Ippur War papyrus that was acquired by the Museum of Leiden at 1828 that contains eyewitnesses report of the Makot. Of the 10 plagues, it contains it. So it's not like something like, it just happened way long ago, and it's like some sort of fairy tale that the grandpa's telling the kids, like, many moons ago, we were in Egypt and the whole place was followed with frogs, and the whole place turned into blood, and the whole place was followed with rice. This is actually the eyewitness report that happened. And there's statues in the El Arish town near the border between Egypt and Israel also speaks about similar reports as this. So the fact that we got out is because you realize it's not like America, or there's going to be a wall. It's going to be a very strict wall. Of course, Mexico's going to pay for it. We wouldn't have to worry about that. Mexico paid for the wall, so in Egypt. And the idea behind us escaping Egypt is not just like a very secure place. It was secured by black magic. So it's not like like the guards were sleeping. It was like unnatural security. It doesn't make any sense how we were able to. No slave ever escaped Egypt. There were so many precautions, yet we were escaped. No one knows how. Besides that, where did we escape to? The wilderness, the desert, for 40 years, with a little bit of matzos. How did we survive that? Besides that, there were like desert kings, nomads that would think of it as pirates, minus the ships. They might have ships if they're smoking certain things, but let's say they didn't do that. They would just in the desert. What would they? They see a group of people, they're going to go and attack. But yet they see this. Not only they survived for 40 years. 40 years? How do you explain a nation going into the desert for 40 years and then coming out the other side, 40 years later, all healthy, strong, powerful, and even, greater in number? Once we got into Israel, we were in Israel for quite some time until Nebuchadnezzar, he destroyed the first temple. And once he destroyed the first temple, he scattered the Jews in the nearby, surrounding areas. For all intents and purposes, this should have been the end of Jewish history. That should have been the end. Once they captured, they sent us we would have still existed as human beings, but not as Jews. We would have existed as wherever we would have ended up in. The question gets a little bit stronger, is 70 years later, we get back to the land, and we rebuild the temple. Now, this is the first time in recorded history that a nation got expelled from its land, and then later came back and recaptured it, and had it became back to what it was in its original glory. After that, we were followed by the Greek occupation, followed by the Rome, who destroyed the second temple, and then scattered us also around the globe. And when you're looking at between the year 250 Common Era to 1948, when the Jewish state came into existence, the Jews were expelled from 80 countries, from more than 80 countries. That means on average, the Jews got kicked out of their countries every 22 years. That does not spell a recipe for survival. That's not survival of the fittest. Every 22 years, of course we were doing the average, some of them was longer, some of them was shorter, that we got kicked out. And numerous places, every single place that we went to, we got kicked out. There's a reason why we're in America, because Russia wasn't, working out so well for us. Azerbaijan, all the different places that it just, we kept on moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. If you keep on moving, you're not able to settle. You're not able to survive. How are you able not only to survive, but survive strong? The Jewish nation is strong. Then you had the Christian Crusades at the year 1095 to 1348. Then there was the Black Plague, which happened between 1347 and 1350. Guess who the church blamed for it? Of course, the Jews were the problem for this. We brought the bubonic plague somehow. And thousands of Jewish communities were massacred because of that. Then the Jews fled to Spain, but that didn't work out too well because then we had the Spanish Inquisition. Either you had mass conversions or mass murder with that. Then you go 1648, you have Tach v'Tach. You have a third of Polish Jewry was completely annihilated during that time. Throughout the years, the Jews were constantly targeted for anti-Semitism, murder, rape, everything bad. That's what the Jews were the target for. 1915, Grand Duke Nicholas, the commander-in-chief of the Russian army, had 100,000 Jews murdered in deportations. In 1917, this is not that long ago, the Ukrainians had massacred 200,000 Jews in almost 500 pogroms. The Holocaust, we lost 6 million Jews. In 1948 came the first time in recorded history that the people that were once kicked out of their land regained the land, now regained it twice. We got kicked out twice out of the land, and now we got it back. And then became the state of Israel. This makes no sense. When you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. You look at historians to explain this, and they can't explain it. According to the normal, natural law of history, it does not make sense. We should not be here. We should not have Israel. We should not have anything. We should be in extinct, and not even more so, in Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 4, verse 27. It says that the Jews will remain few in the number amongst the nations. Now this is also, maybe if we have time, we'll try to explain it, but it says that we're going to be as much as the stars in the sand. We'll see if we have time later, we could answer that. But it says that we are few amongst the nations. Now, we started about the same time as the Chinese. The Chinese, the Asians, have a very, very large population. They're well over 1 billion. We are roughly about 14 million. If we started at the same time, we should at least be 500 million, 500 million. At least, that's sort of what our number should be. However, the Torah says, before we all got kicked out of all of Israel and got into all our exiles, the Torah said you're going to be in exile and you're going to be few. Now, this is a very big problem because we have a mitzvah, and that mitzvah is pru'urvu. We have to be fruitful and multiply. This is why you see a lot of Jews have a lot of kids, right? Ranging anywhere from 5 to 25. That is the ad, depending where you live. We have a lot of kids. Now, if we have a lot of kids and we've been around for so long, then where are we? Why are we only still few? We should be, you can look at it the flip side. Either we should be extinct, or we should be 500 million, or more. It makes no sense that we're exactly what the Torah said that we'll be. We'll be scattered. We're still going to be around, but there's not going to be a lot. Anti-Semitism was first of all, if you look at the definition of anti-Semitism, it's the hostility or prejudice against Jews. It's specifically catered towards Jews. If you don't like a black person, you hate a black person. I know, I'm being careful, relax. I know we can get a little bit of, edgy and stuff. You have a big hatred and you do stuff to, against black people. What are you called? Racist, very good. You hate Asians. What are you called? Racist. You hate Polish people. What are you called? You hate Uzbekistans, right? We know that's a sore topic for the Russian community. What are you called? Racist. You hate a Jew, what is it called? Anti-Semitism. We have our own word, right? We're a separate category. We have, everybody else is racism. Anti-Semitism is special for the Jews. Genocide was only came, who coined the term genocide? It was a lawyer by the name of Raphael Lemkin. He was a Polish Jew, and he this really came after World War II. After the Holocaust, they were like, what's a good word for genocide, mass destruction? Well, they didn't say genocide then. And he obviously used the Latin words and he put it together. But this came after World War II. This came into being. So besides chutzpah, we have a few other words in the dictionary. Unfortunately, thanks to us, because that made it into the dictionary also. There are 4 things when you're dealing with anti-Semitism. First of all, it's universal. Everywhere you go, the Jews were expelled literally from everywhere. So everywhere, it's universal. You hate the Jew. You might not know it yet, but generally, there's people in that society, in that region, that have a very much and strong dislike for the Jew. There's also the intensity of hatred. The intensity of hatred, we could just say one word, and that just closes the whole story, is the Holocaust. Shows you the intensity of the hatred against the Jew. The longevity of it. How long has this been going on? This is since the Greek, basically since we started. Since we came into being as a nation, there was hatred against the Jewish people. Just a short list of, the hatred that we have. We had the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Greek, the Roman, the Byzantine, the Spanish, the Ottoman, the British, the Austro-Hungary, the German, the French, the Russia, the Soviet, the Nazi, and so on and so forth. And so it's not only that we've been hated for so long, so hard, but it's also been from everybody, from all angles. And the fact is when you look at the anti-Semitic reasons behind it, it's so irrational and it conflicts with each other. The oldest example in the book is the Jews took they killed the Christian baby because they needed to drink the blood for the 4 cups of wine. We're not allowed to drink blood. Like, we can't. Like, as much as we would love to drink blood, I don't know where this came into being. Like, how did this even come up? Who was the first person that was like, you know what, wine, blood, same thing. You know what, they're eating, children. I don't know how it came into that, but it's so, they'll complain. The Jews, they're too wealthy to control everything. The Jews are too lazy at taking all the benefits. The Jews, they do too much, they do too little. They take our jobs, they're too lazy. It's always conflicting, and it's the same people. Why do you hate the Jews? It doesn't matter. It's irrational. They're just going to hate the Jews. It's like, there's some people that you just hate their face. It doesn't matter what they're going to say. I just don't like you. It's very bad. It's a terrible thing. But, there's some people that they come to me and, they have, relationship and whatever, other issues, and they just don't like one person. I'm like, why? It's they can't even, the face, the personality, it's everything, like, that is terrible. I'm like, that's like racism on the highest possible level, directed at one person. Like, you're hating someone for absolutely no reason. But unfortunately, we all know somebody, they come into the room, they're like, oh man, this person here is, hi, how are you? Yeah, everything's amazing. Yeah, I miss you so much. More women do that than men, but whatever. The idea is that you have constantly this irrational hatred towards a Jew. And not only that, it's actually mentioned in the Torah. In Devarim, in Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 65. It says, and among those nations, you will not be calm, nor will your foot find rest. It's basically telling us, God's telling us that, you don't listen to me, you're going to go into exile, and your exile's not going to be fun. No one's going to like you, everyone's going to hate you, and you're not going to find any rest in there. Who wants to join this nation? Huh? Anybody want to come? Like, would any sane person who's creating this Torah, assuming that there's no God, say, like, yeah, why don't you come join us, and what happens if you don't listen to me? I will scatter you amongst all the nations, you will go into exile, and you will suffer bitterly, and you'll go from place to place, you'll never be settled, you'll never be happy, but it's good times also. We have Shabbat, it's really nice, you could eat constipation food, matzah food, a few times a week, and then, just to cleanse yourself, or to collect everything. It's going to be great. Then we could live outside for about a week. It's cold, don't worry about it. You can wear coats, it's okay. It's going to be great. It's going to be, this is not a way to start a religion if you're starting a fake religion. If you're starting a fake religion, you make everything nice and dandy. You want to sell a product, you're not going to, tell people, the battery is terrible, the camera is awful, but the call quality, whatever, And it's just a remote. It's not even a phone call. Who knows what they're talking about? But you sell something. You want something to be able to be. You just tell the good parts. But yet over here, the Torah brings everything in it. You look at it. You look at the state of Israel. The state of Israel. When it came in its inception at 1948, the population was 600,000. The first 5 years, it doubled in its population. It absorbed 600,000 immigrants, which is the largest immigrant-absorbing nation on the earth. And then on May 1948, when the modern state of Israel declared its independence, 5 Arab armies decided they're going to attack Israel. They're going to attack Israel. And I really should have brought a picture. I have a picture, but it's not a good one. Israel is very small. It's a tiny little strip of land. And it's surrounded by not-so-friendly people. Well, maybe they're friendly. No, they're not friendly. Not-so-friendly people that want nothing else but to annihilate Israel. So they're completely closed off. And then they decide that they're going to wage war against them. And in fact, the Secretary General of the Arab League said this will be a war of extermination and a momentous massacre. They didn't come in saying, we'll take them, we'll get some slaves, it's going to be nice, we'll kick them back. No, they wanted pure blood. That's it. They wanted to destroy, wipe Israel off the map. And Israel should not have stood a chance. And really shouldn't have. You have, you're assuming, you're in public school, because obviously this doesn't happen in yeshiva, let's hope. You have a bunch of kids gang up on one kid to beat them up. And, so you have a bunch of, refrigerator-style people, going up over there, ones that eat steroids for breakfast. And they come in there, they put this kid is, the little, spaceship maker, he's got his big glasses, pocket protectors, the whole thing, the asthma in the, thing in the holster, he's like, the whole situation. He's getting attacked by these, football players, and they're just like pushing him around. Does he stand a chance? Unless he took Krav Maga for like 10 years, then very likely no. And even if he did, they could probably just hold him, and he'll just be like, one of those people trying to swing in the ear. You have here Israel. You have here 600,000 people in Israel against the surrounding about 50 million Arabs. Now, mind you, when the Jews were in Israel before it was announced as an independent state, while they were in there, it was controlled by the British. Now, the Jewish people did not have the ability to obtain arms or practice or start military procedures. They weren't allowed to do that. Oh, so you're looking at, they just got into a nation, and now they have to fight against 5 armies. 5 armies, many of them each numerous, more times bigger than each of their own. So who is fighting in these armies? You have a bunch of Holocaust survivors. Now, you've seen pictures of the Holocaust survivors. They weren't working out for like 4 hours a day, practicing their, the aim. And these are not military trained people. You had about 45,000 soldiers in this war from the Jewish side. You had a few tens of thousands of rifles that you're dealing with over here. Against all this, not only did the Jews win the war, but they got 21% more land. How do you explain that? How do you, in the right mindset, where in my mind, I'm already picturing, the Arab nations were probably, okay, when we do this, we're going to divide it this way. I'm going to get this land here. They're already dividing the spoils up. It wasn't even a war. It shouldn't have even started to begin with. And yet the Jews won. 19 years later, 1967, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, which, by the way, is everything that touches Israel, went and they decided that it's time to annihilate the Jewish state, take 2. And they were equipped with $3 billion of military aid from the Soviet Union, and they were all backed up by Iraq, Algeria, Kuwait, and Sudan, all non-friends of the Jews. So they went and this was a war that made no sense that they will survive. It didn't make any sense. I'll tell you the extent of it. Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, he was going to address the nation. Give them chizuk, get them powered up, like a pump-up speech. Right before the coach goes in, even though everybody else is 6 feet tall and you're 4.5 feet, we're going to win them, pump them up. And he starts crying. Now, if your coach is gathered around and it's the game of the season and, he's like, guys, and then he starts choking up, and it's not because he's so emotional that you're going to win, because he's it's like, you guys are going to die out there today. I'm going to miss you all terribly. When you have the prime minister getting up to give a strong emotional speech to get the nation and starts crying, does not spell a good recipe for all right, yeah, let's go home. We feel good about this. Let's open up some tea. It's going to be good. It doesn't bring a good feeling. That's what they felt at that point in time. Yet this was known as the 6-Day War because it took 7 days, but Jews only work on 6. No, I'm just kidding. It took 6 days. It took 6 days, and it was known as the 6-Day War. Not only did the Jews win this miraculous war, but this is when the first time that they gained their holiest site, the temple, the part of Jerusalem. This is where we got it back in the 6-Day War. Not only we got that, we got Hebron, we got Bethlehem also. So not only did we win, but we also got more and more land. Can you explain that? It makes no sense. I'll share you some short little stories from these wars. The 6-Day War, Israel gave a preemptive strike. Now, let's try to put some things in numbers over here. Israel had 196 warplanes. The surrounding Arab military had over 900. And so already outnumbered. Israel decided that they're going to do a preemptive strike against the Egyptian airfields, all their air force. So they went and they sent 184 planes out, leaving 12 behind. 12 planes, that's all. And 184 planes went out. And when they went out, they had to make sure that they don't get detected by the radar. So they flew 30 meters above ground. That is very low. That is scary low. Especially when you go in deserts where you have to go up and down. 30 meters just not to be detected. However, the Jordanians did detect them. And they sent a message to Egypt, say, hey, they're coming in hot. Get ready. Get your anti-aircraft missiles ready. They're coming in hot. For some odd reason, a nice coincidence, Egypt changed its programming code the day beforehand, and it didn't give the Jordanians the updated code. So the Egyptians never got this information. Now, Israel went into the Egypt airspace and started bombing these airplanes. Egypt had sufficient anti-aircraft ammunition to destroy it all. But for some odd reason, it wasn't given shoot them down. It just the order wasn't given. And in fact, the General Ezer Weitzman, who later became the president of the state of Israel, went and he said, and he was asked, he's like, for 3 hours straight, Israeli planes were flying back and forth, bombing the Egyptian airstrip. Why didn't the Egyptian go and destroy them? And this, later to be a president of, State of Israel, he was silent. Then he lifted his head and exclaimed, "The finger of God," because you cannot explain it any other way. The conquest of Shechem. Shechem, the IDF saw that this was going to be a very, very difficult conquer. And one of the reasons is because it was a very, very large city. They had tens of thousands of Arabs living over there, so they put this all the way for last. Now, the Jordanians knew that this was going to be a possible, mode of attack, so they put up a very, very strong defense, on the border that's close to Israel. Israel decided they're going to go from the back door, which is always a smart idea if the front door is locked. So they went through the back door, and when they get to the back door, and this was, by the way, this was an eyewitness account it was told by Uri Banari. He goes in there, and the Israeli army walks in, the IDF walks in, and you see the entire area. There's kind of sitting over there. Arabs are waving their white flags, a white handkerchief or white flags, and they're clapping. So he goes on and says, us, in our, not knowing any better, we just walked in and, we were like waving, like the princess way. We're like waving, nice at everybody, like hello, everything was nice and dandy. We had no idea what was going on. Why are they giving up? And as they went in, they saw that there were guards keeping the crowds intact. And they were like, this is weird. So one of the IDF wanted to go and disarm the guard. Because he had a thing, and the Arab guard is like, no, what do you mean? Why should I disarm? So the Israelis shot some, bullets in the air, and this is where everybody started running away, like cockroaches when the lights turned on. Thank you very much. Everyone just scattered away, and this is when the sniper shots began happening. What happened was, by this time, the IDF was already in Shechem, and they took it over without any issues. But what happened later is, when they realized, why did they just let us walk in? Why did they just, they were under the understanding that the Iraqi forces were supposed to be coming in from Jordan to come in and assist them. So they saw the army, they thought this was the Iraqi forces. So they were waving and nice, and Israel was waving back and be like, yeah, nice to see you also. And by the time they realized it, Israel was inside already, and that's it. Within a short time, they were able to take over everything. One of the IDF had a truck that was filled with ammunition. That it was next to a Jerusalem building, and it was being brought to the front lines. Now there was a missile that landed directly on that truck. That means, I don't know if like if a missile hits that type of explosive, that's ridiculous. That's like fireworks. That's destruction in the nearby vicinity. Everyone's going down. And for some odd reason, it was a direct hit on the truck, but it never exploded. The bomb never exploded. Can you explain it? Maybe yes, maybe not. There was, so we said, who are these soldiers? They're people, the reserve. So you had one Israel. He was a cab driver. He was on duty with his friend, which was an electrician, right? Two well-trained in the Israeli. And they came in there, and they had a few light weapons, a few bullets. And then they come and they see an Egyptian half-track. An Egyptian half-track, that's you morph a tank with a truck. And then you put it on with machine guns all around the side. It was coming towards them. It was from the Egyptian side. They saw it. They froze. They're like, what are we supposed to do? I don't know. So they just for not knowing anything else to do, they just pointed their guns at them. And the truck stopped. And they're pointing the guns, and the truck is stopping over there. And they said we were waiting for them to shoot first because we want to save our bullets. We have just a handful of bullets. And they saw that nothing was happening, so they slowly inched their way towards the truck. And when they came into the truck, they looked inside. They saw 18 Egyptian soldiers, armed soldiers, sitting there with a petrified look on their face, shaking. So what do you do at that point? You're like, put your hands up. It's the idea is that's how a guy feels if he ever wins an argument with a woman. They're completely thrown off guard. Be like, well, you say something, and the woman's like, you know what, you're right. And be like, and you have your, a list of other, arguments there, and they'll be like, well. Yeah, I'm right. Because women, as we all know, in Bet Yaakov and all these things, you teach you how to win a fight from the beginning. There's no, there's you learn the ABCs, you learn how to braid your hair, and then right after that, here's how you ever win a fight against anybody ever. This is a very important, information to know. They were so caught off guard that they didn't know what to do. They're just like, okay, put your hands up. And they marched them out. You had a cab driver, an electrician, marching out 18 armed, Egyptian soldiers, and they're marching. Once they got, called for backup from the IDF, they went and they asked the sergeant in charge and said, how come you didn't fire at the soldiers, at these two soldiers? And the Egyptian sergeant said, we really wanted to, we tried, but our whole bodies froze. We were paralyzed. We couldn't do it. I don't know why. And things that it can't explain. Secular newspaper Haaretz summed up the 6-day war like this, and I'm quoting: Even a non-religious person must admit this war was fought with the help from heaven. Moshe Dayan and Yitzhak Rabin, both military, secular leaders, once they got, after the 6 Day War, so we got the Kotel back, the Western Wall back, they went, and as customary, they put in I believe it was Moshe Dayan, he went and he wrote a note and he put it inside the wall. Now, a journalist was following him. Any good journalist knows there's no such thing as privacy. And they took out the note and wanted to read what he wrote inside this note. And he wrote out a pasuk from Tehillim. The secular Moshe Dayan wrote in a pasuk in the Tehillim, in Tehillim chapter 118, verse 23. The verse is, Me'et Hashem hayta zot, hi niflat be'einenu. This was from the Lord, it was wondrous in our eyes. The generals, the secular generals knew there was no way we should have won. It makes no sense. And yet we did win. You know why? Because there's someone upstairs that's pulling some strings. A short while later, in 1973, there was known as the Yom Kippur War. This was because it was started on Purim. No, just kidding, Yom Kippur. So it started on Yom Kippur, and is known as the Yom Kippur War. This war was started, you had 100,000 Egyptians invaded Israel from the south, and you had 1,400 Syrian tanks invaded Israel from the north. And by the way, Israel was, where is most of Israel on Yom Kippur? Either at home or in synagogue. So you're not religious, you're usually at home. You're religious, you're more or less in the synagogue. And I remember when I was in Israel, and behind my yeshiva, we had a window, and everything there is like mountains. So I was able to see very far to like a main highway. And throughout the entire year, Shabbat, always there were cars going there. Yom Kippur, nothing. Dead. Israel is dead. Yom Kippur. So this is when they barge in from the south and the north. Attack on all angles, and Israel was completely caught off guard. And in fact, I heard this, but I've never seen an actual source for it. Where when they were coming in, they were like, "Where is everybody?" The Egyptian and the Syrian. They're like, "Why is no one here?" To the extent that they were like, "This must be some sort of ploy to an ambush," and they started backing up or being more careful. Meanwhile, the Jews were just like completely oblivious of the whole situation. Again, I don't know if that's factual or not, but that's what I did here. And anyways, they came, they left, they came, and eventually they invaded, but then they, like anybody who's confused in life. So the Syrians came in with hundreds and hundreds of tanks. Israel didn't have that many tanks. So at one point there was 3 Israeli tanks against 150 Syrian tanks. That's not good odds for tank numbers, right? No odds are good for tank numbers. 1 against 1. Nothing's ever good with a tank. Tank is like both things can destroy each other. It's just like, you're fighting the same way, just now you're both like in, like a Transformers type of, situation. So everything is just going to, it's the same thing as hand-to-hand combat with just like more power. So they were fighting, they were shooting against each other and calling each other names, like the general thing. And then Israel runs out of bullets. So they radio in, we got to go out. They got the order, stay put. And be like, we don't have anything to shoot. But I don't care, you're staying put. So they had to stay put, but what are they doing? They're not going to stay in one place. So they started going from back and forth. They're moving the things back and forth. For some reason, the Arab side the Syrian side decided not to pursue it. And later I found out is that they saw so many tanks. It was like 3 tanks. They were just moving directions because they didn't want to get caught. So they were like, the people have so many, so they didn't, attack it. And in fact, it was a Syrian that swore that he saw an army of angels surrounding those few tanks, and that's why they didn't shoot against it. During the same time, there was Commander David Yini, who was pulling his troop from a Syrian confrontation, and they got stuck in a minefield. That's not a good place to get stuck. So what they did is that they were crawling on their bellies, and they were trying with their sticks to figure out what's a mine, like brushing it off to avoid, setting any mines off. Then all of a sudden, as they're starting to crawl, there's a huge, huge windstorm that blew in. So they had nothing to do but sit still until the windstorm blows in because they can't see anything. The windstorm went on and on to the extent that it started blowing everything away. To the extent that 30 inches of soil was blown off, all the mines were very easily seen, and you were able to just walk right out of it. Happened to be in the right place in the right time, right? I don't think so. There was another in the Yom Kippur War as well. There was an Israeli soldier that took an entire group of Egyptian army people captive. One soldier, Israeli soldier, right? So like the tanned, like skinny, smoking the cigarettes, eating the galinim, with the gun. He's sitting over there, and he takes on this entire group. And can you imagine? It's like a little kid, with a stick is fighting off a whole gang, the Crips. Can you imagine that? Does it make any sense at all? And when they asked the Egyptians, so why didn't you fight against it? It's one guy. He says, it was very odd because when we got closer to this one guy, we saw there were like thousands of like other soldiers that we saw. But as we got closer, these soldiers started disappearing. So we all thought that he had somewhere hiding around. So we all thought there was more. And then they asked this Israeli soldier, Who was with you? He's like, I don't know, solo, just me. That's it. I'm just here alone. I didn't see anybody. So you see here miracle after miracle, that it just makes no sense how the Jewish nation, not only they have a land, but actually survived and actually winning wars that makes absolutely no sense that they should be winning. Then you had the Gulf War. The Gulf War is in 1991, where Iraq threatened to use chemical weapons. And chemical weapon, it's actually, I remember, because I had family in Israel, they all had to have gas masks. You all had to have gas masks, and it was chemical warfare is completely above like everything else. And they never used the chemical bombs. And when they asked why, it was because usually the wind blows one way, and that would have been beneficial for the Iraqis to use that. But for some reason, during the time of the war, the wind blew the other way. So if the Iraqis would have went and destroyed, something, they would have gotten a backdraft of it. How do you explain that? The change of the winds just when you happen to be, in the, wanting to use chemical weapons? Iraq went and they tried and they fired 39 missiles into Israel. And Israel did not retaliate. It's a whole long story in itself. We don't have time to go into it. But out of all those missiles, you know how many casualties there were? Were so little, it's unbelievable how little casualty there was. They had different things. One missile landed in a garbage dump, didn't explode. Another missile landed a few feet away from a gas station, also didn't explode. Then there were missiles that were flown into the sea. And it wasn't like they were like, okay, there was one guy with a little thing over there, be like, okay, move it a little bit over here. These were like targeted, weapons. It wasn't that we're just guesstimating. Israel's in this area, just shoot there. They had targeted, they had the ability to hit the targets. Why didn't they? Things that you can't explain. You had also, there's actually 2 missiles where no one knows where it went. It just exploded, or did it? No one knows where it went. There was a video that was going around a long time ago where you see, you see this Arab. How do I know he's Arab? Because he says Allah Akbar every time he puts a missile inside. He goes inside, he says Allah Akbar, closes his ears, and it blows up. It goes and he's shooting missiles, and then all of a sudden you see he put in another one, and then it blows up in his face. And then you see like a picture of like a baby laughing. It's when you look at these things don't make sense. Even Hamas, when they ask them, it says you shoot so many missiles at Israel. How come before even the Iron Dome or even before that? They're like, I don't know. We send it. We're very good at target. Our target is very accurate. We can't. They actually say it's the hand of God. How do you explain to them? Why are you trying to? It's like trying to talk to a monkey. Be like, if you see the hand of God not letting you blow up the Jews, why do you keep on trying to blow up the Jews and saying it's the name of God? Allahu Akbar, and then go and blow up more innocent people. That was more in the recent years when you have Hamas and the whole war on terror with the tunnels. There's a lot of stories in that we don't have the time to even go into. The miracles that happened in that war is also unbelievable. I believe they wrote a book just on that war, just on the war in Gaza. Mark Twain in 1897. I want to quote for you something that I read before, but I feel it's very, very important and very applicable here. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, the Persian, they rose, they filled the planet with sound and splendor, then faded into dream stuff. The Greeks and the Roman followed, made a vast noise, and they are gone. The Jews saw them all and beat them all. Now, what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert, aggressive in mind, all things are immortal, but the Jew. All the other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret to his immortality? This is not immortality. Thank you. As soon as I said that, I was like, I should probably change that. But I was like, is anybody going to really remember? But then, all right. Thank you for that. Immortality, not immorality. Okay. 2 very, very different things. So thank you for that. Like sometimes you say something, you'd be like, okay, I said it wrong, but where should I go now? All right. So in any case, this is Mark Twain was not a Jew. And this is what he said of the Jewish nation. And we see this. This is in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, chapter 31, verse 16 through 17. It says that if the Jewish nation doesn't follow God, will go away from God, then God will punish them. He will wage war, be angry with them, hide the face from them. Bad things will happen to them. This is what it says. And then the Torah makes it very, very clear. If we act like we're supposed to, we're going to be okay. If we don't act like we're supposed to, we're not going to be okay. The Gemara and Yuma, and as well as modern historians, they confirm the spread of such assimilation prior to the destruction of the first and the second temple. As well as historian Lucy Davidowitz in this writes that the Soviet Jewry aside, about half the pre-World War II Eastern European Jewry was observant. The other half was becoming more secular. They said that Berlin was Jerusalem and German was the chosen language. The fact that the Jews surprised, you could say, well, listen, Hinduism is surprised, Confucianism has also been around, but you have many religions that lasted a long time. So too, Israel and the Jewish nation and the Jews survived as well. There's very, very big difference. I saw a very nice explanation. I don't recall where I saw this on this idea. You have 100 people on the beach. They're on the beach. You have 20 people in the water. Then there comes a rip current, and it takes 20 people and swimming under the water. It drowns them for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, it goes away. The bodies float up. 18 die. 2 of them survive. The fact that 100 people weren't affected by the rip current, not surprising at all. The fact that 18 died, also, it's unfortunate, but it's not surprising because they were underwater for 30 minutes. The fact that you had 2 people survive, that's what brings us the question. That's like, why did they survive? The fact that Hinduism, Confucianism, all these other foreign religions, it makes sense that they survived because they lived in their own land. They were the majority nation. Why shouldn't they survive? That brings me to the question is those 2 people, the Jews, that kept on going underwater, why are they still here? Can you explain anything rational, taking God aside, anything other than the supernatural, for explaining of why God is still here? Not only is God still here, but rather God is also overseeing the creation. He's playing a very, very strong role in it. The land of Israel, you should know, was a very, very important land in the ancient times. It was, this was a meeting point between Europe, Asia, and Africa. So it was a trade route. So people wanted it. People really wanted it, and they fought for it. I think you have, over 30 nations that conquered Israel. That's over the period of time. And yet, not only did they fight for it and they went inside it, but yet no nation was able to cultivate it. We know that it was a land flowing of milk and honey. But when the other nations captured it, it was nothing. It was desolate. Mark Twain visited Israel, or Palestine back then, in 1867. And I'm going to quote for you what he said. "A desolate land whose soil, though more sufficiently rich, produces only thorn, bushel, and thistle. There is such desolation one cannot even imagine that life's beauty and productivity once existed over here. The land of Israel dwells in sackcloth and in ashes." This makes a very, very odd understanding as how come the Jewish people are flourishing in Israel. You know how much we export. Not only we're exporting things. If I'm not mistaken, the land of Israel was, in the recent years, was the only one that produced a net gain in trees, as opposed to anybody else. They had a net gain. There were more trees planted in Israel as opposed to anyone, which means they didn't lose trees. They actually gained trees in it. And what's interesting is that it's a desert. So there's like 2 factors on this. We see in Exodus, in chapter 3, verse 8, there's a land of flowing of milk and honey. From the time of Josephus even, which was, over, 1,300 years after, the Torah, Matan Torah, the land was still flowing with milk and honey. This was still going on. I'm sorry we're a little bit late. We have a little bit more, but if anybody needs to leave, I don't feel bad. Feel, free to, get out, leave. It's fine. It's okay. More than happy if you stay, but, by all means. So, I want to finish up over here. Then it says, in Leviticus, chapter 26, verse 32, it says in the Torah, "So devastated will I leave the land, your land will remain desolate, and your city in ruins." That's what it says in the Torah. And it just happened. A land that was flowing with milk and honey, the Jews leave, all of a sudden it's ruins. The Jews come back, all of a sudden it's back again. Can you explain that? We had technology that they didn't have. We use the same technology. Skip some stuff, it's late. There's a story that's told of King Louis of France. He went to a mathematician and a Catholic philosopher by the name of Pascal. I'm sure some of you have heard him. Asked him to prove the supernatural in just 2 words. Prove me the supernatural in 2 words. You know what he said? The Jews. Those 2 words are the Jews. Prove the supernatural is the Jews. When you ask people, how many Jews are there in the world? Ask somebody who doesn't know anything about Jews. You ask them, how many Jews are there in the world? They're going to give you the craziest answers.
5 billion.
500 million, a billion, all that. And when you tell them, no, it's about 14 million. They're like, no, it's not possible. They're like, no, we're really only 14 million. He says, but you guys are always in the paper. Like, how do you explain that? So, because we own it. That's why we're always in it. And so, when you think about it, why do we make such a long, standing? We're always in the papers. We're always making a thing. By the way, it's not true. We don't own the media. That's what we want people to think. So now no one knows what's true. Okay, so not only did the Jews survive, but they actually contributed a significant amount to society. The Jews, which make 0.2% roughly, of the population, has contributed a significant amount. Recent stats shows that 23% of all Nobel Prizes from 1901 to 2017 were Jews. They were Jewish recipients. And we look over here. Chemistry, had 36 prize winners that were Jews, 20% of the world total. I'm not going to say how much it is. I'm just going to tell you what the percentage of the world total are Jews. Economics, 39%. Literature, 13%. Peace, 9%. Physics, 26%. Physiology or medicine, 27% of the world population. We're tiny. We're not even a percent, and we accomplish more than almost a fourth of all Nobel Prize winners are Jews. Besides that, I have here a list of things, but due to the time, we don't have the time to go in there. The Jews have one of the greatest creators in history, that especially in medical and scientific advances, there's an estimated 2.8 billion lives saved thanks to Jews. Fritz Haber, who invented the synthetic fertilizer, saved about 1.3 billion lives. Karl Landsteiner and Richard Lowenson, they invented the blood transfusion. You have Abel Wollman, the chlorination of the drinking water. You have Samuel Katz, measles vaccine. Sir Ernest Chain, penicillin. David Sacha, the oral rehydration therapy for cholera. You have Alfred Summer, vitamin A therapy. Baruch Bloomberg, couldn't get more Jewish than that. Baruch Bloomberg. And hepatitis B vaccine. Jacob Gershon Cohen, a mammogram. Albert Sabine, polio vaccine. Rachel Schneerson, the hip vaccine for bacterial meningitis. Brian Drucker, the Gleevec medication, which is an anti-leukemia drug. And you have Henry Heimlich, which invented the Heimlich maneuver, or remover as well. You have here all these. That's why, for people that want to boycott Israel, please do. Yeah. Make sure, you choke, do not use a Heimlich. No. Make sure they say, no, you don't use that. Rabbi Finger also brings down a bunch of other interesting things. The cell phone, which we view today as a drug and indispensable from society, this was developed in the Israeli branch of Motorola. Windows operating system. Most of these operating system was developed by Microsoft Israel. Pentium MMX chip was designed at Intel in Israel. The voicemail technology was developed also in Israel. 4 young Israelis developed the technology of AOL Instant Messenger in 1996. I actually remember this, this different thing. According to the industry officials, Israel has the highest, strongest airborne security. And when people need to train for something, they go to Israel to train for that. Israel has over $100 billion economy that is larger than all its immediate neighbors combined. And we don't do oil. It's important to do that also. Israel has the highest ratio of university degrees to the populations of the world. Israel also produces more scientific papers per capita than any other nation by a large margin. Israel is ranked number 2 in the world for venture capital funds, right behind the United States. On a per capita basis, Israel has the largest number of biotech startups. Israel also is the world's second highest per capita of producing new books. Israel is the only country in the world, and this is what I said before, which entered the 21st century with a net gain of trees. Israel has more museums per capita than any other country. See, the disgusting Israel. So far, it's terrible, right? What does UN say? We're violating all these, laws. Yeah, terrible. Israel leads the world in the number of scientists in the workforce with 145 per 10,000 people. So every 10,000 people, you have about 145 scientists. US has 85 per 10,000. Japan has 70, and Germany has less than 60, which means we lead almost everybody else, almost double of what we produce in the scientific world, and specifically in scientists. Israeli scientist was the first fully computerized no radiation diagnostic instrument for breast cancer. Israel company also developed a computerized system that you'll be able to check when there's about 7,000 deaths in America alone that are attributed to wrongful medication and hospitalization. When they go into hospital, they give wrong medication and they die from that. Israel developed technology to prevent that from happening, to prevent that. So please, if you want to boycott Israel, please make sure to take wrong medications. Israel also was the first, this is something so cool, the first ingestible video camera. So you take a pill and it takes pictures as it goes through your colon. No more of that. This was invented by Israel. There was many other things. We all can't forget Waze. Yeah. So there's numerous things that were invented by Israel. The inhumane Israel, which is, I don't know how it gets away with all that it does. John Adams, the second president, American president, said, "I will insist that the Hebrews have contributed more to the civilized men than any other nation. If I were an atheist," says John Adams, "I would still believe the faith had ordained the Jews to be the most essential instrument for civilized nations." Now, if we are so small in number and we're so hated, how can we make an impact? And in fact, in Isaiah 42, chapter 42, verse 6, it says that we are going to be a light unto the nations. How and why? We are hated by everybody. We get prosecuted. We get pushed out. We're in exile. Nothing goes according to plan. And yet, not only that, but we provide for the nations. We actually give. We actually give more back. Mark Twain wrote again. Oh, wow, I didn't realize we quote Mark Twain a lot over here. He's, because all these things this was an evolution. This is one thing that you could say. This class, went through evolution because it started off as just a few pages and then it grew. Mark Twain wrote like this. He is about the Jew. He is as prominent on the planet as any other people, and his commercial importance is out of proportion to the smallness of his bulk. He contributes to the world's greatest in the world's list of greatest names in literature, science, art, music, finance, medicine, and other abstruse learning. Not only do we survive, but we have a ability to survive. We also provided a moral and ethical standing for the world. Before the Jews came in, killing infants was morally correct, if you wanted to. This was okay. Everything changed. The Jewish people brought in an idea of respect of life, peace, equality, justice, love the neighbor, social. You can't say, well, it was only the Jews, because everybody said that, but the Jews were the first one to actually put it into practice. And it's very interesting, because the Western world, where the Jews were influenced by, were able to influence, is very different than the parts of the world where the Jews were not able to be influenced by. And you notice they deal very differently in the society. You have the Western world is the more morally, you can say, world. You go to some African tribes where they still give in certain sacrifices.
Nigeria does female circumcision on day 7.
There you go. That's Baruch Hashem, you guys are not Nigerian. Okay?
I had a patient like that today.
Everyone. It's sad, it's disgusting, it's terrible, but they think that this is humane, this is okay, this is important. The Muslim ones?
Egypt also does.
We could be also Muslim. Okay. Anyways,
Nigeria specifically.
But Egypt also
put it this also way, the United Nations have on their wall, here's a picture of United Nations. You know what it says on the United Nations? A verse on Isaiah. You can't see it, I don't know, whatever. It's here. Just trust me, you can show it, look at it afterwards. They say, it's printed in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. It says, and they shall beat their swords into the plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not lift up the sword against nations, neither shall they learn war anymore. Basically, try to unite everybody to avoid war. Doing an excellent job. The Wall Street Journal went and they ran a series on which 3 individuals, in their view, had the greatest impact in the 20th century. You know which of the 3 people that they chose in the entire world that has the greatest impact in the 20th century? Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein, and Karl Marx. All Jews. The probability of all them being Jews are so low, and yet not only are we here, but we are strong. We are, the Jewish religion is as strong as ever. It's, Baruch Hashem, it's getting better. I can't say strong as ever because that's incorrect. It was at one point it was much better. But Baruch Hashem, we're getting stronger. There's a big Baal Tshuva movement. There's a big movement of getting closer to God. We are not only here beyond any reasonable reason. We should not be here. We should not be existing today. And not only do we exist, we are talking about existing, and we contribute to the society. Can you explain that in any other way? Other fact that there's something supernatural going on over here. There is a reason why we're still here. There's also a reason why we're the target of anti-Semitism. We are supposed to do. We have obligations to do in this world, and that is through the Torah. There's 2 ways to do it. There's a good cop, bad cop. You're either going to do it willingly, or I'm going to make you do it not willingly. But it's going to happen at the end of the day. When the Jews went to Germany, they decided, okay, maybe to avoid anti-Semitism, let's become German. And they became German. But what did the German say? You're not German. You're a Jew. And as a Jew, you need to die. So no matter whatever we try, it's never going to work. The only thing that we need to do is follow the Torah and follow the path of Hashem. That is the only answer to get out of this whole sticky situation, all the anti-Semitism, everything that we need to deal, that is the only way to deal with it. We learn from here 2 things, and then we'll open up for questions. Number 1 is the fact that the Torah was able to predict this. The Torah was able to predict a nation. You're not going to be large, but you're never going to die out. You're going to still always exist. You're going to contribute. You're going to be a light unto the nations. And you are never going to be destroyed. And you're going to be exiled from place to place to place. All a recipe for the disaster, everything conflicting with each other, and yet we see that everything came exactly as it's written in the Torah. This is another proof that you have over here that not only the Torah was written by no human, but rather by a divine being, but that divine being had the power to foresee the future. It's not bound by time. Any questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Don't be bashful.
Did Amalek hate us, or did they just want to start off with us?
No, they had a very strong. Amalek had a very strong hatred. There's no reason for them to fight against us at one point. They just wanted to, destroy us. Most people that want to destroy us, there's very little reason. Arabs need more land, really? Really? You need to go be in Israel. You have, 12,000 times more land in the entire nearby Arab regions. You need that little, size smaller than New Jersey. For what? For the Western world? You don't even... Whatever. Yeah, let's not get into
Also, is anti-Semitism also technically for Muslim, but no one uses it for?
It's coined technically because from the same region, but it's coined specifically for Jews. Anti-Semitism was coined specifically for Jews.
Okay.
That's just called a racist if you're against Muslim. Yeah.
The pasuk that you said that the Jews will not be destroyed and they'll be small, but they'll be. Where is that one long pasuk?
There's many different ones of them. You had over here the Jews will remain few. It's in Devarim chapter 4 verse 27. So it says this is in the same pasuk, and Hashem will scatter you among the people, and you will remain few amongst the nation. In Malachi says that it will never be destroyed. In the 3rd chapter of Malachi. So you have over here, in one pasuk it even says you're going to remain few, which means you're going to remain, but you're going to be scattered. Which makes absolutely, no sense if you were thinking, let's me produce this fake religion, let's do it this way. Any other questions? Besides off camera. Any questions on camera? No? Going once? Going twice?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.